tens of millions and sends thousands of troops to treat Africa's victims and keep the virus from spreading here. ABC's Dr. Richard Besser is on the front lines in Liberia. Good morning, Rich.
Good morning, George. This morning in Texas, they continue to test a patient who traveled and has symptoms of Ebola, while around the globe, the death toll from the disease continues to rise. The CDC now says this is their largest international outbreak response in their history. I got an exclusive tour of this Ebola isolation unit here in Liberia, where more patients are surviving than ever. This is the first time a journalist has been allowed into the Ebola ward at OA2.
It's getting hotter with each layer, but feeling safer with each layer, too.
Suiting up this carefully, layers and layers of protective gear. Maybe why they've never had anyone who works here catch Ebola.
And then we just have to identify one another.
Very good.
Dr. Jerry Brown, a Liberian surgeon, is in charge. He prays every time before he goes into the ward.
Protect us, Lord, from every danger. Once you come in here, you don't ever go back.
That's it. We're now considered contaminated.
Yes, contaminated.
60 people in a ward built for 40. The wards the U.S. is building won't be here for weeks. America realizing we must stop Ebola here so it doesn't continue to spread around the world. My head tells me I'm protected from the body fluids that would transmit Ebola, but my heart pounds anyway. Ravi is a 26-year-old who caught the virus from his roommate and feels that Dr. Brown saved him.
He gave my life. No, Ravi, I'm not God.
He gave you life.
Yeah, he gave me life.
This patient is a nurse. Here, healthcare workers who are on the mend help monitor the others. Already infected, they can work in the wards without the brutally hot protective gear. After just 40 minutes inside that unit, I was dehydrated and exhausted. But something surprised me. For the first time during this crisis, I saw hope. George?
Thank goodness for that. Okay, Rich, and Dr. Besser will be taking your questions from the Hot Zone all morning. Tweet him using the handle at Dr. Richard Besser.
Deadly Ebola outbreak in Africa, and tonight the first confirmed case here in America. The patient diagnosed here in the U.S. tonight, a team from the CDC rushing to the scene, to this hospital in Dallas, where he is in isolation showing symptoms. It's believed he's been infectious for several days after returning from West Africa. This evening, the test results confirming it is Ebola. Tonight, word President Obama has been briefed, and now the all-out push to track down anyone who may have been in contact with him. In a moment, Dr. Richard Besser with what he's learning right now from his sources at the CDC. He spent many years there. Tonight, he has exclusive access face-to-face with patients battling it. But first, the case here at home and the questions. What about the planes this man took to America and the community where he was staying? ABC's Steve Osinsami leading us off.
The CDC is confirming late today what doctors in this Dallas hospital feared, that the patient who walked into their emergency room Sunday with high fever and other symptoms is sick with Ebola, the first case diagnosed in this country.
I have no doubt that we will control this importation or this case of Ebola so that it does not spread widely.
Health officials today trying to calm fears.
We identify all people who may have had contact with the patient while he could have been infectious. And remember, Ebola does not spread from someone who's not infectious.
The doctors and nurses isolated the patient immediately. They say he left Liberia on the 19th, arrived stateside on the 20th, developed symptoms on the 24th, and walked into the hospital on the 26th, but was sent home. When he felt so sick and had to return on Sunday, he needed an ambulance. Tonight, they tell us he's strong enough to talk and is saying he's hungry. But compare this patient's story to the dramatic hospitalizations of the American patients diagnosed in Africa, flown into the country in specially outfitted planes, and walking into the hospital in protective suits. Doctors who treated them successfully say this patient's chances of beating the disease improved with round-the-clock care. Authorities aren't sharing too many details, but say that this patient was here visiting family. Tonight, they're watching every one of his relatives closely. David?
Steve Osinsami leading us off tonight, and I want to get right to ABC's chief medical editor, Dr. Richard Besser, who is in Liberia tonight, getting exclusive access to an Ebola ward. You can see images of Dr. Besser there suited up, walking through. He spent many years at the CDC himself here in America, and Rich joins me tonight. And Rich, the breaking headline at this hour, you've been in touch with your sources at the CDC. This patient had been home here in the U.S. for 7 days, now positive with Ebola. Is there real concern tonight about who this patient might have come in contact with?
There really is. The hospital will take care of this patient, but the key is finding every single person that the patient came in contact with during the period that they had symptoms. They'll track them, they'll follow them for 21 days. If any of them develop a fever, they'll go into isolation and they'll get tested.
So every person this patient came in contact with, they will now follow for 21 days. But Rich, this caught my eye. This patient had gone to the hospital, was sent home, and then went back to another hospital. Does that concern you that the signs appear to have been missed?
Well, that is concerning. Every hospital in America has been asked to be on high alert and to ask anyone coming in who's sick whether they've traveled. If they've traveled to West Africa and have symptoms, they're to be isolated and tested.
Rich, a lot of people are going to be thinking about the airplanes, the flights that this person took back to America. Is there reason for concern tonight for the other people who are on these planes?
Well, the good news for those passengers, you cannot transmit Ebola until you have symptoms. And the symptoms didn't develop until they arrived here. And then even when there's symptoms, it has to be contact with body fluids. So there's not a lot of concern there.
And Rich, just a few moments left. You spent years controlling infectious diseases with the CDC. How much does this concern you tonight now that we have a confirmed case here in the U.S.?
Well, it is concerning. We've talked about this possibility. It really reinforces the importance of everyone working